Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar The Last Airbender. I am Dan, and as always, I am joined by the late airbender himself, Mr. Chris Billingham. Give it up for Chris Billingham. Woo!
What up?
Woo! So this week we're going to get distracted and not discuss the episode, The City of Walls and Secrets. Obviously referencing Ba Sing Se. It's a good way. I like this episode a lot because it has so many creepy, weird ideas in it. But it's another one where plot wise, not like a lot like actually happening.
No, not until like the last couple of minutes when you're like, ooh.
But I would say with this one, I think it's less of a problem for me here because they give Zuko and Jet a pretty reasonable sort of arc throughout this. That kind of we've got the lack of a plot happening with Aang, Toph, Katara, and Sokka, where they're just sort of meandering about the city, finding it quite weird. I guess their plot is kind of like trying to meet the Earth King. I guess that is kind of their plot. But the Zuko Jet plot feels like it has a reasonably solid sort of structure to it across this episode. But yeah, for those who don't know, I guess I've kind of accidentally just recapped the episode there. But this is of course the episode where the gang mooch about Ba Sing Se, and we don't talk about the war in Ba Sing Se, and it's all super Orwellian and very strange. With they're being handled by Joo Dee, and they're trying to meet the king because they want to tell him about the comet, but also Aang his mind is wandering occasionally to thoughts of Appa, who they believe is somewhere in the city. So it's a good episode to learn about all what the city's like, or the culture of the city. It is very peculiar, and it's a really sort of it's a really fascinating episode because that alone is enough to prop it up, I think. But then we have the secondary plot, which is that now Mushi and Lee, or Zuko and Iroh, are sort of settling in to the sort of outer wall of the same city as tea shop workers. But Jet slip back into his old ways, is determinately, obsessively trying to catch them out, and ends up just giving up his whole attempt at subterfuge and just tries to outright just attack them, which is once again, Jet, a terrible plan. You are the worst when it comes to plans.
Not a great plan.
Not a great plan. You are the worst at plans in this show. Just want to make that clear. How impatient. It's like you watch them for a day and went, screw it, they're not going to firebend. I guess I'm just going to burst in and attack them. What is wrong with you? Anyway, he does that, but is eventually captured by the mysterious Dai Li agents, and is seemingly being sort of reprogrammed and such. There is no war in Ba Sing Se. It's all very creepy and weird. So yeah, that's the basic sort of setup for the episode. You may have noticed that even though I hinted that, as usual, we might not talk about the episode straight away, I'm forcing it. I'm saying we're going straight into it. Chris, what did you think? No tangents.
Well, it was
this
funny
week.
because even the introduction of being like, it's Chris Billingham, and you being like, yeah, and me being like, what up? It sounded like two men that didn't have the energy. But we're trying to fake the energy and make themselves more energetic by being more energetic. I liked it. It's one they said. Look, I didn't come out the episode being like, whoa. I did come out the episode being like, ooh, because of the ending. Mm-hmm. As you say, there's a lot of scene setting for the city.
I think we need to create an official Chris review spectrum for that. When you do noises to indicate you do this a lot, or not maybe a lot, but reasonably regularly. Like you'll just say, "Oh, what's episode?" I kind of felt like "whoa" or "way," or and you'll give it a noise. I would at some point we need to sort of do a 1 to 10 scale of all those noises, and then
that's fair.
And then then we could officially sort of use them as a rating system.
That's yeah. No, that's a good thing. I will say, because it's Mushi, isn't it? Is Zuko's name?
He's Lee, I think now.
Oh, that's a shame, because if it was Mushi, I was going to be like, obviously I'm going to call him Musho for any time that comes
Well, instead
up.
of Lee, you're going to call him Leo.
Yeah, or that works. Whenever anyone says the name Leo, I immediately think of that clip of Leo Sayer escaping the Celebrity Big Brother house. Which, if you haven't seen it, look it up. Amazing footage. Yes, I really. You know what? This town has been talked about for 250 episodes. So devoting the episode to it and getting to know it and explore it.
Yes.
I think it's actually fine, as long as they stay in the town for a while. Like, as long as the town is... I want the town to be the rest of the city, like, the rest of the season. Like, I really do. Because already it's a little bit like... I was absolutely right on my... I mean, it wasn't much of a prediction, but my prediction that, like, I'd so many, like, what happens now with the people in the drill? Have they caught the firebenders? What are they going to do? And I think I was like, I'm probably not going to explore any of that next episode. And we don't. So already a little burnt from that. But I you know what? I think you're absolutely right. If it weren't for the subplot, you'd finish this episode and be a bit like, oh, okay. Well, I feel like this was the first act of something. But because of the subplot, you finish the episode and go, that was an enjoyable episode of Avatar. It's one of those classic things where we're going to sound inherently negative because we watch the episode and then have to talk about it for 45 minutes. The reality is, in a binge, even week to week, someone not doing that, this episode's good. It's a good, solid episode. It's just there's not necessarily a lot to dissect, apart from, I suppose, the town. I mean, theory-wise, they clearly seem to be, hypnotizing people. And making them feel that there's nothing wrong. Interesting that but they equally seem to be like, if you play by the rules, it's fine, because obviously they've not made any moves to hypnotize Zuko and Ira, who were involved in that scuffle, and they've not made any moves to hypnotize Aang and the gang.
Correct. It did seem that fear was like when they were doing. There's a small montage in the middle where they see a bunch of different people, right? Like they're like, "Do you want to say anything about the war?" Yeah. And those people just look afraid. They don't look hypnotized because they're about to say something, and like Joo Dee like shakes her head, and they're like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, I was going to say, well, you have Joo Dee shaking her head, don't you? So,
So like they clearly there's an element. It's a mixture, it seems, of fear-based control, misinformation, and hypnotization for those who do know. So anyone coming in causing trouble and refusing to abide by the rules is basically getting taken by the Daily and hypnotized, but everyone else is being controlled by either being kept in the dark and not knowing, or if they know, fearing being taken by the Daily and simply just goes along with it. So it's a pretty... I mean, Orwellian is the only real word for what's going on in Ba Sing Se.
And it is very atmospheric and creepy, and like I say, it's good stuff. I had a good time. It's just I guess how do you feel 45 minutes? But it's I think they did a really great job of setting up the town. I thought the art and the shot where they're like, how hard can it be to find him? And then they're just this huge landscape below them. It kind of what really caught me about that is, like I say, obviously I joked about the 250 episodes thing, but they've been bigging up Ba Sing Se I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right.
You were so close. Now. It was just the last letter. Ba Sing Se, not Ba Sing Sang.
Ba Sing Se.
Ba Sing Se, unless he's going on X Factor, then Ba Sing Sang.
They've been digging up. They've been bigging up Ba Sing Se for a number of episodes now. Very rarely when that happens, it's like not to do one of the usuals. Don't drink. It's not Harry Potter, but that fucking shot of that glass tower thing. It's like, really, Gallifrey in Doctor Who is this amazing city, and we only ever see that hourglass style structure or desert land, at least in the classic series, like because it can't live up to what they've set up. Whereas it feels when they go in and you have this cityscape, it's like, oh, that matches and lives up. It feels like the place they've been describing for so many episodes.
Right.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I think Ba Sing Se was a. I think it's one of those things where like it's really hard to make a place live up to that many references, because it's been set up as the center of the opposition essentially, because we've been to a lot of small towns around the Earth Kingdom, but they are just that, small towns. I mean, one of the first ones we visited was like Kyoshi Island, which was like seemed to be a village of about 30 people, and then the biggest we came to after that would have been Bumi's Omashu, Bumi's kingdom, and that was quite big, but you could fit that into one frame, right? It was like a very vertical sort of like triangular shaped city that you could fit into a single image on the show. And Ba Sing spoke was I'm not gonna get over Ba Sing sang, am I? Here it's like, it's not just the visual element, which is when you see it and it doesn't fit into the frame of the show. It's just this seemingly endless cityscape. You realize how great and powerful this city is, and you understand why the Fire Nation have yet to permeate it. The wall that they were trying to get through last week was just the outer wall. There's a huge farming land between that and the inner wall that then takes you into the first part of the city, which is ironically then called the outer section, which is where the poor people live. Then there's there's a middle section where there's sort of like shopping and food and sort of the middle class sort of citizens live. And then there's a high society inner section where the king lives with all of the other people from high society and government. And so not only is this city sort of Orwellian in its the way it's controlling information and its populace, but it's also pretty screwed up the way that the wealth divide. But it's also, it's weird, because what I think is strange about this is that there's a clear wealth divide. Refugees, artisans, people who work with their hands is how Joo Dee describes the people that live in this sort of outer circle of the city. Poor people, as Katara then puts it, and then we have sort of like students, and the financial district is in the middle ring. So this suggests a wealth gap, right? Yet the guy later on says he had to work for 3 years to get a property given to him in the inner ring, and that's communism.
Yeah.
So it's a real weird mix of ideas that make this city up, and it's all very, very fascinating. Like, to the point where I don't think I minded this episode having a thin plot, because I every time I watch it, I'm always just like, this city is so bizarre.
But what then? And I don't. This is one of those things where I'm being contrarian. What a big word. For the sake of it, as opposed to actually feeling this way. But I already know how you're going to answer this. But how come thin plot but fascinating setting works for you this week, but last week thin plot but entertaining as fuck action didn't work for you?
I guess world building
counts as character in a way.
Sort of, yeah. It doesn't replace character work, I don't think, and I still would always prefer character work. But I do think world building is more valuable than just action. If I feel like an episode could be removed with minimal effort from the whole run, and I wouldn't lose any character stuff or overall plot stuff, just a few little connecty things, that you could fix if you wanted with ease. Like, if you were just sitting down looking at these as scripts, I suppose, because we're talking about the writing of the show here. So if you were just sitting and looking at these as scripts before they're produced, and you could make any changes you wanted, and you've got an episode like The Drill that you could literally just put that script in a bin, do a very small adjustment to the ending of the episode before, and almost no adjustment to the beginning of this one, you could just link them together. And whereas if you took this out, you're missing a lot of important context for the world, the city. Yeah, you couldn't remove this episode under any circumstances.
No. You'd be so confused. You'd be so confused. Like, oh, they're now in Ba Sing Whispers, are they? Like,
yeah.
It just wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, they're having a good old time in Ba Sing Spoke.
No, you can't do. No, you can't do two. You did spoke. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Ba Sing talked. Sorry.
I had another variation of Spoke, which is my favourite, which I've been saving, which was Bar Sing spoken word poetry.
Bar Sing chat.
Yeah, talk's fine. You've not done talk before.
Yeah. So I didn't realize that you spoke twice. So my bad. I think this episode kind of gets away with it on the grounds of it still feels important to the overall run. It feels the world building doesn't quite make up for this episode not having much character stuff, which is a shame, and I think it does hurt it. But at the same time, there's so much world building in this episode. I'd be worried you'd overload it, or you'd lose something if you tried to do too much else too. So I kind of have to I understand how this decision happened, basically, to keep this episode focused on the world building. Because when you're sitting down to write this and you're trying to come up with like a character situation, I don't think there's much you can do that wouldn't detract from the world building. Because the episode spends such a great amount of time doing that, and it needs to, because it is a very complex situation they're in.
There's a fair amount of character stuff as well. I loved Toph. Although I have a nitpick corner on it. I loved Toph being so done with it before they'd even got there, and clearly because big family had been there before and had knew the city and stuff, and was very
she was over it,
very kind of about it. Yeah, very over it. Do you want to just follow the A road, Dan? Because we're going to nitpick corner. My nitpick corner about it would be that hasn't come up. Like, they've been talking about this play, just a hint of it. Just like, it was like, this makes sense and is awesome, and I actually really like it. And it's quite, you can get humour from it, but there's also quite, like, you could explore it as quite a serious thing of, fundamentally, she's been plonked back into the world she escaped from. She's been plonked back into the high society that she chose to leave, as she herself says in this episode. I was a bit like, surprised that hasn't been embedded as they've been journeying to this place.
Now, it definitely wasn't embedded, you're right, but I do think they might have referenced her being there before when they first decided that's where they were heading. I feel like, right, I could be wrong, but I think there was a throwaway line of, I've seen it, or maybe not seen it, obviously, but, I have been there, like, it's not that great, like, why do you want to go there? I feel like there was a line in that vein, early on, when they first decided. The problem is, it's been so long they've been travelling to Bar Sing. Bar Sing Se has been the goal since, the library? How long ago was the library?
Yeah.
And even before then, maybe they were thinking about it. I can't remember. So, like, it's been a while, like, we've been making this journey. So, I feel like it's just maybe separation. But, yeah, it definitely wasn't embedded. I feel like they could have definitely, made an effort to make multiple references to make it really clear. So, it is a shame that it wasn't sort of referenced prior to this episode in a major way. If it was like a passing line when they first set their sights on the city. So I agree with that criticism. I think you're right. I think there was an opportunity there for it to come up a little bit more. But within this episode, it's handled so well. Her sort of attitude to the whole thing. She's fed up of it. Like, she's so tired of it, and it's so clear. And this is like, it's the world she, and it's immediate from it's called being handled. Get used to it. It's that line onwards. Like, they just nail it. Like, it's so cleverly written. Toph's attitude to this whole place is just exhaustion. She's just so done with it. And I love the way they handled it. I think they do a lot of really clever stuff as well, because it's that thing of, like, when they, so for those who don't remember the plot, one of the I suppose the plot of this episode is they're trying to see the Earth King to tell him about the comet, and they realize that while they won't be allowed to see the Earth King for 6 to 8 weeks, because you can't just drop in on the Earth King, they basically work out he's appearing at a high society party that night, and decide that they're going to sneak in, and Toph very correctly points out that there is literally no chance of Sokka and Aang passing for high society people. They're disgusting idiot children, and it's very clear that they're not going to be able to hide that. So she gives Katara, who's the most salvageable in her view, that thing, but they have that moment where Katara's like, well, you're not exactly, a proper lady, are you? And Toph's like, I chose to leave that. It doesn't mean I don't know how to do it, and that's
I think she said something like, I learned how to do it. You haven't even had that sort of thing,
right? And it's another one of those moments where you realize that Toph had to fake that her whole life. So there is like her exasperation is actually not just that she doesn't like it; it's that it represents her sort of castration, like her restrictions. When she was living with her parents, the facade was the high society stuff. That's what she had to maintain. That's the stuff that wasn't her. That was her oppression, And when you think of it from that angle, it like really does. It does highlight Toph's sort of unique perspective that none of the other characters in this show seem to have. About all this stuff, Aang and Sokka bowing at each other until they end up accidentally headbutting themselves. It's
well, their whole mock high tea thing was brilliant.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think the Toph stuff in this episode is really well done. Would have been supported, supplemented, improved if there'd been more build up. So I've taken the A road. I'm at Nitpick Corner. I'm on your side. We've met up for tea. We're having a chin wag, and we're all talking about how they didn't do enough work to set up Toph's situation prior to this.
And is it good tea or is it basically warm leaf water?
Yeah, it's hot leaf water.
I just love that gag where Zuko was like, "That's all tea."
It's so good. It's so good. I love everything with them in this episode. Their whole
I was going to say. So speaking of them, the element of that story I really liked was they didn't need to, but they took the time to do the whole Jet's gang leave him. And Jet's gang are like, "This is the new life we said we were after. Like we're done." I thought that was really effective and kind of helps fansplain. Whilst it's not a great plan. He's worked up, he's pissed off, he's fed up at them, he's annoyed with that, he's like, sod it, I'm just going to attack. Like, the emotional state he's in has taken a beating by that point because of that.
Yeah. And I think it almost a little bit excuses some of like the stuff we not moaned, but like sort of complained about a little bit last week when we talked about how Jet's arc wasn't very clear. Like what, like has he, he's claiming he's on a new path, but he's doing these behaviors. Evidently, he still hasn't quite learnt the lesson we thought he'd learnt. Like his new path still involves him hunting down evil Fire Nation folk. He doesn't seem to have truly learnt that lesson. Which I guess is, it's clearer here. Whereas last week we were just like, wait, had he learnt it and unlearnt it? Did he never learn it? Like it feels a little clearer what his arc is after this episode, or what his arc has been up to this point. But yeah, you're right. Like the idea that he's just had his gang basically say you've gone too far again. We're not doing this. Sort of forcing him to be making him desperate, basically, and resort to that does almost explain the only other my nitpick corner, which was that Jet's plan was fucking terrible and was never going to work. I don't understand. Like, I'm just gonna swipe at them with my stick things until they firebend in front of everyone. No,
yeah, I mean it's very clear they weren't going to fall for that, wasn't it?
I just don't see any reality in which that functions.
The real shame of it is we don't get that scene. I would have loved, like, he gets carted off and Zuko and Ira are alone. I would have loved that scene where Zuko just turns to Ira and goes, "I told you shouldn't have fucking warmed up that tea."
Yeah. Yeah,
he does a real like "I told you so" moment on it.
But like that whole thing is just top to bottom. Like I'm loving what they've done with Zuko and Iroh this series, particularly. I think their journey has been so enjoyable to watch. On the whole,
it has. But he is there because he knows he knows that Aang's going there or will be driven there. That's why they're there, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. I think they if you remember, earlier in this season, they found themselves sort of cast out from the Fire Nation.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know, I know that.
And
but like...
they were traveling alone for a while, and when they came back together, they've sort of basically just become refugees for Ba Sing Se because there's nowhere else to go that they'll be safe. Zuko still has talked about ultimately capturing the Avatar, but they're not there for the Avatar at this stage, I don't believe. They're just there surviving. They're scraping by.
Yeah, which is very much how it comes across. And I thought there was some line or some like indication of everyone's on that path now.
There was, but it wasn't like they're following each other. It was in the same episode we established Aang and the rest of the gang were heading to Ba Sing Se. It was the same episode we set Zuko and Iroh on that path as refugees. Right. So we knew they were coming to a head. We knew they were going to be in the same place, but they weren't going there to meet. One wasn't following the other. It was just timing sort of thing. It was like almost like kismet or whatever you want to call it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Which I think works reasonably well because they had a lot of them following each other in the first season. So keep them separate.
No, it was great. Yeah, and well, like you say, it's a different texture as well for them. Like it's a new dynamic. Like those two have almost it's almost like a sitcom at points.
Those two just bumbling about making tea. The grumpy grandson and the absolutely. Yeah, it is exactly that. It is almost like a sitcom for several of these seasons.
Which is great.
I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I think those two particularly this season. I just really enjoy their whole arc. I think it's really neat the way they. It's not like they've turned to the side of good or anything. They're just surviving like anyone would. This world often is not black and white. It's always shades of grey, and seeing them just trying to get by and relying on the kindness of others and struggling with that in Zuko's case, is definitely been a really rewarding journey as a viewer to see. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it.
You got any other notes before
let's talk about the Dai Li a little bit. So they, and let's talk a little bit about we got to talk about the Joo Dee situation as well. So the Dai Li are basically initially introduced to us as protecting the cultural heritage of Ba Sing Se. Now, a little bit of background, Chris, that I don't think ever comes up in the show, but we know from supplemental material. The Dai Li were actually started by Avatar Kyoshi, with the idea being they would protect the culture of the Earth Kingdom in general. Over the years, as the city has become reasonably corrupt, they have become agents of that. Protecting the culture is code for protecting the secrets, protecting the way of life, protecting this oppression that's occurred where the poor people are sort of forced to live in essentially like slums with refugees, and the richer people live in these very wide open spaces, very nice houses with high society. Now, I don't feel like the show is necessarily saying, hey, we're going to try and fix this as part of our goal, but they are sort of saying this is what's existing. It's like in our world, we the Earth Kingdom is kind of based on China. It's not too subtle, if I'm honest. Everything from the way that the government seems to work to the stylings of the buildings. The Earth Kingdom, kind of China. Not 100%, obviously, but they've definitely borrowed a lot of elements of that. The Fire Nation has a lot of Japanese influence, and the Earth Kingdom has a lot of Chinese influence. And the rumors that go around about China having these like murder vans where they bundle political dissentees into vans and they disappear forever does feel a lot like the Dai Li taking people off the street, who don't. So the way that this has all been warped and I don't feel like. I think they've done a really good job, basically, because I feel like in a lesser show, you'd be like, this is the plot now, saving the city from this. But there's a part of the way they style this where you just sort of go, this is just how this place is, and it's going to be very hard to change this ever. And I think that's kind of clever, the way they've done it. They've made it their way of life.
Because it's also clever because, like, every city, every town we've seen so far is like under siege or under attack by the Fire Nation or like controlled by the Fire Nation. And I love this notion of there are cities that are functioning and are livable, but within them comes their own level, you know, it's you wouldn't want to live there in a different way. It doesn't become. It's not like for the show from now on you'll be thinking, well, why don't they go back to Ba Sing Se? That place seemed ace. Do you know what I mean? Like they've created a place that is a haven, which feels very real for the world, but fundamentally isn't because of what goes on there.
Right. So they don't have a safe space. That's basically
but equally not everywhere. But it's not realistic for everywhere to be a war zone. But it's also, you know, not. It's you don't want there to be an answer for everyone, and this is where it's not a war zone, but equally, like I say, there's not an answer either, which I think is quite clever.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's very well done in that sense because, like, we've known Ba Sing Se was the last city that hadn't fallen to the Fire Nation, so we knew to some point, to a certain element, you know, it was going to be a safe place. But I don't think we quite knew the lengths they were going to have gone to. And I think by doing it that way, they've made it so, yeah, you're right, that there's not going to be, well, why don't they just stay in Ba Sing Se forever now and work out of there as their base? You know, you want them to keep moving because that is kind of the show in a lot of ways. So you don't want to mess with the structure of the show too much as well. But I agree with you and what you said earlier as well. Even when I first saw this episode, you know, I wanted them to stay here a good while. I won't say what the answer to that is, but that was my desire also. So, and to talk a little bit about Joo Dee, an interesting thing. So, Joo Dee, for those who don't remember, although I don't think anyone forgets this moment from the show, it's one of the most haunting. Joo Dee's with them all episode. She's their handler. She does a bad job of it in the end because, like, in reality, you know, her lack of being on top of them is what leads to them being at that party and causing disruption, and upsets Long Feng, who's the leader. He's the cultural minister, but he leads the Dai Li. They're very unfortunate to run into him at the party and make it very obvious who they are. I suppose we should talk a little bit about Long Feng in a minute as well, as he's kind of been introduced as sort of a villainous character here. But the Joo Dee is fails to keep them under lock and key, and at the end of the episode, Joo Dee is brought in to bring them around, and it is a different woman. I'm Joo Dee. The creepiest thing. The idea being presumably that the original Joo Dee is now being punished or brainwashed or something. Now, I want to briefly tell you a story that Nadia told me. Now, I'm not going to reveal what her job is, but she deals with companies in China. And they often, when they're taught English in China, are told to adopt, for other English speakers, English-sounding names. And they sometimes get it right. She was speaking to a lady called Phoebe, and she's known of other people like, there's a guy that goes by Jeff Wong. His real name definitely isn't Jeff. He's a Chinese man. It's not Jeff. She found that quite funny. And then the other one was I think it was her sister who had come across somebody who had adopted the name Baby Ball out of just, I guess, not understanding how English names work, which is kind of funny. But so she was emailing this one company, and there's a lady called Phoebe running this account. And she was emailing her, but she's also speaking to her on the phone. And one day, she rings up Phoebe, and it's a different woman on that phone number. And she's like, I'm Phoebe. But, so what happened to the person I was speaking to? Yes. Okay. So then Nadia spent about, 12 months speaking to new Phoebe, who also emailed from original Phoebe's account, but was just clearly a different woman, spoke in a different way, had a different, use of language, didn't 100% remember all the stuff they talked about previously, because obviously it's not really the same woman. And then about a year later, original Phoebe came back. And Nadia said, "Wow. You're back?" And she paused and went, "Yes." And then carried on. Acknowledging that she wasn't the same woman, but not discussing it any further.
Wow.
So, I don't know if this Joo Dee idea is inspired by something like that, where like companies in China sort of like you get hired and they assign you, you're our Phoebe now, and when you leave the company someone else becomes Phoebe, or whatever. I don't know if it's inspired by that or like any other ideas, but that is something that I don't know if it's just culturally or whatever is completely normal and fine to them. Like the idea you would have a regular contact and so not to disrupt your experience contacting the company by making you by a whole new person and a whole new name to remember. They're making it easier by basically assigning somebody that role.
And it is. I don't have any experiences like that. I can only speak to the episode, but it is so effective when it happens in the episode.
Right.
Like
it's creepy.
Absolutely, yeah, makes you be like, oh, okay. And it just sets it just says so much about the village and how it's the town and how it's organized, and the city, sorry, and how it's organized and stuff like that. It's a really effective, and that's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not even sure they will go back to that, and I don't even think they need to. It almost not being explored is as a viewer more intriguing, more fascinating in a way,
more eerie maybe. Yeah. If these things remain a mystery, but isn't that like? And it's just funny because when we first watched this, like, so for those who don't remember, we talked about this in the first series of this. But I've been a fan of the show since early doors, and last year I got Nadia into it because it was, it had a bit of a boom last summer when it first hit Netflix, and it was during lockdown, and a lot of people rediscovered or just outright discovered Avatar. And Nadia was one of those people. We sat down and we watched it last year, initially because we were going to be doing this, and then just because we just blasted ahead. We ended up watching it all and all of Korra, I think, before we even recorded episodes of this, maybe. I can't remember exactly how it worked out, but we were well ahead anyway. And when we were watching this last year, that moment really weirded Nadia out because she was like, that's spooky because I know that's a thing. like for her, it had a whole other connotation because of her story with Phoebe. So yeah, isn't that spooky and weird?
And I suppose it could companies dealing with large international companies, it could, it's not necessarily the malice in that real life example. I mean,
of course not. No. Culturally,
they
they just thought that was a normal thing to do. Would be like, to make you have the impression you're still dealing with the same person, not understanding that from our perspective, that's super weird and creepy. Because we're not going to not notice it's a different human being. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's the pretense around it. It's the refusal to acknowledge it makes it so much weirder, which is obviously because they've told her that, this is how you keep your job. You are that person. You will continue to pretend to be that person. Under no circumstances reference the old one because we don't want to create that confusion. Again, it's not a malice thing. That person will just left the company and came back.
It also says it to me it also says something really upsetting about the lack of people that notice. The lack of people, clearly they don't have a response for that because potentially they've never had to deal with that before, which is shocking because it's like, shit, people don't notice this. Like,
it's either people don't notice this or they just tell them don't acknowledge it because we want to maintain the illusion. It's so weird. So this had a whole different experience with Nadia, but I definitely found it always super creepy. And what I think as well is they do such a good job at the end of the episode because Joo Dee's a character we've just met, right? We're not that familiar with her voice yet. We're not that familiar with the character model. So making somebody who sounds pretty like her but not like her and looks pretty like her but not exactly is a risky move. Because I think there could be a chance that somebody could watch the end of this episode and not understand it's a different woman, but they've done just enough to make it seem like a replacement, but not so much that it causes confusion. And that's a really fine line the art department and the voice casting guys have had to walk when creating that moment. Because it's not like one of the characters says, but you're a different person. You just know that from the subtle changes. Obviously, it looks different and sounds different, but not massively so. And like I said, that's such a risky move. So yeah, I thought that was a really brilliantly executed moment in the show. Whenever this episode crops up, my mind immediately goes to that moment. It's just it just really is a really cool, creepy thing.
It's very effective.
So let's talk about Long Feng. So he's the cultural minister, but it becomes clear as they talk to him towards the end of the episode that he is basically running the Earth Kingdom. The Earth King himself is just dealing with day-to-day. No, he's not dealing with day-to-day issue. He's just sort of like a figurehead, basically. And that actually Long Feng and the Dai Li seem to be running things in a wider sense. He's dealing with the war. He's dealing with resources. So you can think maybe him and the Dai Li maybe even are part of this whole division that's occurred within the city. Maybe and not maybe it's happened over several years, but he's currently enforcing it. We first meet him as the gentleman that lets Toph and Katara in, and at first he seems like a kindly figure. Obviously becomes more sinister as the episode goes on. How did you feel about him as a character in general? And let's be fair, if we are, and again, I'm not going to reveal where this goes, but if we are in Ba Sing Se for several episodes, I think it would be pretty smart to make him the sort of main antagonist during that time.
I just thought that switch, between him being kind and letting them in, and even as it built, and it was a really effective script and story choice to have his speech at the end intercut with the Jet getting brainwashed, because it was just it made him even more threatening. And it's funny because he seems really threatening at the end, and in a way I don't know whether if you took him out on his own it would feel that way. It's because it's cut with Jet that makes that scene so effective. I just love this kind of slow reveal of his true motivations as well, and just his, as with kind of all the city, his matter-of-factness with just nope, this is what it is. This is the situation. We don't talk about the war, and if you talk about the war, you will get kicked out. It was very, very effective, but especially so because of the editing / writing of it being intercut with the Jet stuff.
Yeah, that was a really smart move, and I also think his motivation kind of makes a certain amount of sense. We have one of the last standing cities that haven't been affected by the Fire Nation. Why would we have our people?
Absolutely.
While you don't agree with his methods, you do see where he's coming from, and he sort of says he talks about the people here are happy, not knowing about it. They don't live in fear. We keep them safe. But we don't just protect them from the physical threat of the Fire Nation. We also are keeping them safe from, news of it. So there's no anxiety. These people are happy because they don't think that there's anything wrong outside those walls. While you obviously think that's a terrible thing to do, and keeping the people in the dark like that is awful. You at least understand why he's doing it, even if you don't agree with why he's doing it, if that makes sense. And that's always a good thing for a villainous character.
The only thing about that, though, is it would be such a shame if everyone's hypnotized or whatever. It would be such a shame to never have a scene where someone recognizes Iroh, because that would just be a cool idea and a cool scene.
Right, because he sieged the city the first time.
Yeah, he's the guy that was attacking them the first time. Someone sees him and is just and in a way, it suddenly struck me that it's almost odd. I know that it's only been played as a joke. I can't believe I'm coming back here as a tourist. Mm-hmm. There's, you got to imagine he's a little bit oh shit.
Yeah, 100%. And it's going to be interesting because we had a reference in the previous episode. I think somebody talked about when they were sieged by the Dragon of the West. So it hasn't been forgotten. Certainly not by the military folk, anyway. I guess the issue is, how long has this not telling the people inside the walls about the war been going on? Do the people inside the walls even know about that, a siege?
Yeah, good point.
The military folk might, because we've all met some military folk on the outer wall, the ones that were protecting them from the drill that were kind of useless, that Aang spoke to. They referenced it, so they knew, clearly. But I wouldn't be convinced the people living inside the walls that are not being told about the Fire Nation attacking were aware of anything happening last time that was a siege either, because that was within the last 100 years. It was within Aang's disappearing. It's been during that time the Fire Nation have been taking over everywhere. So it's really the same war. I mean, in this episode, he even refers to it as an endless war in a way like, oh, we're not really looking to end this war. It won't ever end. It's just going to keep going, and we'll just dig in and let it blow over. We've sort of accepted that they can't be defeated. So instead, we're just going to protect ourselves and protect our way of life. And again, I don't agree with him, but I totally understand that attitude. It makes perfect sense, right? For Long Feng to sort of approach it that way.
As we complimented this show on before, having villains where whether you agree with the motive or not, you understand them is a really effective thing that this show often does.
So other quick notes just before we move on. One of my favourite jokes, maybe in the whole show, and there's like 2 or 3 of them in this season that are just like standout jokes that I was thinking about. We talked about the Toph Blind joke from when she was like, "There it is what it'll sound like if one of you sees it," and then she reminds them she's blind. The other joke that I always think of when I think of this season is the King's Bear will be there. Don't you mean his platypus bear? Surely it's like a skunk bear. An armadillo bear? Maybe a gopher bear? No, it just says bear. This place is weird.
Yeah.
That gag is amazing. Like the acknowledgement that they've never really done single animals on this show. They've always been some sort of mixture. And making the idea of a single animal and not, hybrid animal and not sort of chimera type thing is weird. That's what's weird.
It felt very meta.
It is. It's extremely meta, but it is also like totally within. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that joke just because it's so good. There was one other one that I thought was really funny. I'm learning all the elements. How hard can manners be? Which is an amazing line. Which is pretty much straight after the platypus bear line, actually.
Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah, let's see. We talked about that stuff. I think Oh, yeah, I liked that the trains that took them through the farming outer area into the actual city itself were earthbending powered. I thought that was pretty neat. Just a nice little touch, like 2 earthbenders on the back, like almost driving it forward with earthbending. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, I like that. Nice to see, we get a lot of bending in fighting or to do something. It's nice to see bending almost in a day-to-day scenario.
Right, and you've got to imagine that the walls of Ba Sing Se were literally built by bending too, and are repaired by bending when they're damaged. So it is a clever use of it. Like it just goes to show you what these societies can do with the skills that they have. Like look at the Northern Water Tribe. Big city made of ice that presumably they just built with water bending. It's pretty neat. So they've always done a good job of making sure that that not all benders are establishing that not all benders in a functioning society on this planet that isn't at war. Not all of them are used for fighting. In a city like this that's not yet been taken over, and like with the Northern Water Tribe as well, which was one of the few places left not Fire Nationed. There were people who just bent for their job. There was the 2 guys that brought down that big sort of door with waterbending that let Aang in when they visited the Water Tribe the first time. Like that's that guy's job. He's the doorman. And like it's just neat.
Yeah.
I do enjoy that. We talked about Long Feng. I enjoyed Aang becoming entertainment at the High Society party, doing his little spinny trick with all the coloured water liquids and stuff. I just thought that was nice. And one thing I made a note to reply to, you mentioned, but I wrote down my thought because you were still talking. I didn't want to interrupt you, but you talked about how the Dai Li didn't arrest Zuko and Iroh, Lee and Mushi in that example.
Or didn't hypnotize them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the reason that is because because I watched this episode twice for this, because the first time I watched it, I was really hungry and I ate cereal and didn't make any notes, so I had to watch it again to make notes. It's really sad, but it's true. I literally watched it twice back to back, finished it, went back and just started it again.
How long were you eating your cereal for?
Well, no, it's one of those things where like it took me like I don't know 5 minutes to eat the cereal, but then I just was watching it. Like I had stopped eating. Like but I wasn't. Yeah, I was just enjoying the episode, and I was like, oh shit, I didn't make any notes because I was eating cereal, so I couldn't, and then I forgot. So I had to go back and rewatch it and make notes. But the scene when the Dai Li show up to the tea shop scene, the local police make it clear that Jet started the trouble and just started attacking two peaceful tea makers. The shop owner says the same thing. And a random guy is like, this guy attacked the finest tea maker in the city. And Iroh's all like, well, finest, I don't know about that. But, thank you.
That's fair. So, yeah, that does sort of cover that. You're right.
So because everyone basically says, including the local police, these guys are innocent in this situation. This crazy kid just started attacking them and yelling about the Fire Nation. And obviously, that's the funny thing as well is about the way this works is obviously you don't talk about the war in Ba Sing Se, and yet they must capture refugees all the time because refugees are refugees of war. At one point, actually, Sokka says that to someone. What do you mean there's no war? Where do you think all these refugees have come from? And it's just ignored, right? So in those lower slum areas, the refugees must get in there being like, yeah, the war, and then being kidnapped. That must happen all the time. So Jet, not knowing that Ba Sing Se is city of walls and secrets, rambling about the Fire Nation, of course they were going to capture him. He's talking about the war. Like, no, go away. Whereas I guess Mushi and Lee are just two tea makers he was randomly losing his mind at. Like, these guys are keeping they're keeping their mouths shut. They're refugees and they've learned not to talk about the war. We're not going to waste our resources, brainwashing them. So I think that's the explanation. I made a note to respond to that, but you were in the middle of a point, so I didn't want to interrupt. But yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. That
right.
I hadn't quite thought of it that way, but yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and the other little note I made is just that I do love the Dai Li's rock gloves that they use to like grab things and people from a distance. Like they've got gloves that are made of rock or something, and that's how they captured Katara and Toph. They sort of one goes around the mouth, one grabs them at the stomach and pulls them back. Like it's really clever. Just a neat little. I like that everyone like these sort of groups have different like fighting styles and stuff, and I just find it really fun that they I find it fun that that they're always looking at new ways to make the villains fight. Like the different groups of villains they've come across have always had different like approaches to combat to try and mix things up.
Not even that. It just feels like every element of this city has been thought about, including how the people would attack, would fight, etc.
Right. Exactly. Yeah,
really
100%.
Cool.
Yeah, really neat. So, should we move on to the triv?
Yeah, let's triv it up.
Let's have a look. When the gang finds the notes for the king's pet bear, they ask Katara if she means platypus bear, skunk bear, armadillo bear, or gopher bear. When Katara says just bear, Toph replies, this place is weird. The exchange highlights the fact that most animals in the Avatar world are chimeras or hybrids of two or more real-world animals, and non-hybrid animals are uncommon. However, in the waterbending master, Sokka gives Princess Yue a carved fish which she mistakes for a bear. The fact that she mistakes it for a bear, and there was no dialogue to suggest that a bear would be something that was out of the ordinary, this is kind of at odds with the group's reaction in Ba Sing Se. I think, yes, technically true, but, that's a
Who gives a fuck?
Bit of I think the triv just went to nitpick corner, basically.
Yeah, the triv is like
someone gave the triv a map to nitpick corner.
But yeah, they are absolutely right, but it's fine. It's all good.
While Katara and Toph are getting dressed for the party, Aang and Sokka are playing a game similar to rock paper scissors, or its Asian counterpart, Jan Ken Pon. Which is that? Where specifically is that from? Is that Japanese? I don't know. I think that's Japanese, Yeah, it is. Japanese equivalent of rock, paper, scissors. So there you go.
Nice.
Let's see. At the Earth King's party, the background music is a famous Chinese song, Mo Li Hua. meaning the jasmine flower. I probably mispronounced that, by the way, and I do apologize. It is heard faintly in the background at the Beifong estate in The Blind Bandit and serves as a sort of theme for the Beifong family throughout the show. But obviously used here more as a symbol of high society in general. Some satellite TV services, such as DirecTV and Time Warner Cable, incorrectly named this episode "Secrets of Ba Sing Se." I don't know if that's a working title that they got given in advance that they've never changed or what, but there you go. Obviously, a little shout out this week for Professor Zay, however you pronounce it, Professor G, whatever he was called, the guy that they lost in the library, the guy that stayed.
Oh yeah.
When they're at the university, the student tells them to go find that professor for answers.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we know he's not around.
How did they react to that then? I didn't sort of take that in. Did they visibly go?
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to look back to it. I didn't. I particularly. I'll bring it up though. Bear with me. Oh, thanks, Netflix. Jesus. The giant banner for Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw. They put Fast and Furious as huge letters, though. Because obviously Fast 9's out, and they're just trying to, like, capitalise on that.
Yeah, I saw that earlier and was like, what film? Oh.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
fine.
Presents,
Like,
technically.
not a problem. Like, I'm glad you've got the movie. It's not a bad movie. It's fine, but, like, it's a bit tricky to do it the way they've done it there. But let me see if I can find this. So here we go. Here's them talking to the student.
Seen any sandbenders or nomads around here? You should ask Professor Zay. He teaches the class on desert cultures.
Right. And which of your
No
professors
reaction
should we ask about
at
the one
all.
with the fire name?
They just carry on.
Right. Yeah, that's why. Because I think if they'd have been like, I'd have been like, who's that guy? And like either looked it up or mentioned it here. But yeah, that's why I didn't. There was a real opportunity.
I see what
think.
you're saying now. You're right. That is weird. But yeah, there you go. It's in the triv.
Yeah, fair play.
So it's real. That's what makes it real, that it's in the triv.
Yeah, man.
Aang's apparent dislike of the social segregation of Ba Sing Se hints at the idea that monks do not segregate themselves due to riches. Yeah, I thought that was a nice little moment. He said that, the way of life is much different to the way the monks see it. I assume monks have a much more sort of like flat sort of structure in terms of worldly possessions. You don't own a lot. It's not really about collecting riches. Everyone's kind of on the same plane. We're all equal. Blah blah blah. So, which is true, but not the way things work. Capitalism, yay.
This whole episode is you treading on political landmines and avoiding big rants.
Yeah. There's been elements of that. I've definitely stepped around some political landmines that could have led to me being ranty this week. I will continue to do that, Chris, by ignoring the fact you've even said that, and I'll step around that too. Go on to the next piece of trivia, which is in the scene in which Aang asks if they could see the king. Joo Dee states one doesn't just pop in to see the Earth King, which is a potential reference to Lord of the Rings when Boromir says one does not simply walk into Mordor. It's possible. That was at the time that was quite a meme of a sort, an early proto meme type thing. The one does not simply walk into Mordor was a popular sort of quote that was adapted repeatedly in different scenarios at the time. So it's possible that it was a little reference.
Really? When did memes become a thing?
What's that, sir?
I'm googling it. When did memes start? Were memes a thing when this first aired?
Yeah, it was. Well, it would have been like it was those early proto memes, wasn't it? It was like they were memes without being necessarily called memes. It was like there'd be an image that would get repeatedly shown with like text on it, then it would just like be shared around.
And obviously, and that is one of the more famous ones without a doubt. But
yeah, so
an example of a common type of internet meme in the 2000s. Yeah, no, fair enough.
Yeah. So there was it didn't become what it's become now, the many-headed hydra that is memes. Just lots of different internet content being dubbed memes now, whether they are or aren't. It's pre that obviously, but so maybe even pre the use of the phrase meme. But certainly the one does not simply walk into Mordor was definitely a thing around this time for sure amongst the internet culture. And
fair
then the
play.
final piece of Avatar triv, Chris, the Electric Light Orchestra hold a record for the being the band with the most Billboard top 40 hits without ever actually getting a number one single.
I've never really. Dad's a fan, I think, but I've never really got into ELO. Like, I couldn't name you a song or anything.
Well, you could name one, presumably.
I'd know it if you sung it, but I wouldn't.
Mr. Blue Sky, surely.
But I didn't know it was them. I wouldn't have been able to tell you who sung it.
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, I knew them well enough. I knew them well enough to shorten them to. Yeah, I know the song. I knew them well enough to shorten their name to ELO, but not. I couldn't name Mr. Blue Sky as being their song specifically.
Oh, right. Interesting. I mean, I don't know a lot of their
to
tracks.
Be fair, if you'd have phrased it differently, if you'd have said who did Mr. Blue Sky, I might have guessed ELO.
Right.
But phrasing it, name an ELO song, I'd be like,
That's fair. So, like I said, well, this trivia kind of lends on that. I guess was Fox on the Run then? No, that was Sweet.
Because Jeff Lynne, isn't it? Yeah, Dad's a big Jeff Lynne fan. I just looked at it. Yeah, it is Jeff Lynne and Rory Wood.
Yeah, no, I to be fair, I do totally understand. And actually, Chris, if you look at what the trivia is actually saying, it's kind of implying something similar, because it's sort of saying they have the record for having the most songs in the top 40 without actually ever getting a number one single.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like
exactly.
that actually sort of tracks, doesn't it? It's like they've got this weird cult following that's enough to get them into that space, but never enough to push them into number one. If anyone's wondering why in the world we're suddenly talking about ELO, I don't know why, but I started trying to wind Chris up by doing non-Avatar trivia at the end of the trivia every week, and now it's just become a thing we do.
You need to either not do it or commit, because you explaining it every week. They had a number one in the UK, by the way. Xanadu, I think is how you pronounce that.
Xanadu?
Xanadu. It's the title song from the soundtrack to the 1980 film Xanadu.
But is that featuring someone? Because the vocals on that is a lady.
It's featuring Olivia Newton-John, yeah.
Who's presumably in the movie Xanadu. Yeah, I know that song. Xanadu, Xanadu.
Oh, that song.
Yeah.
Oh, they
Great
did. They didn't do the original, surely. They did. Oh no, they did a cover of "Roll Over Beethoven" as well. Roll over Beethoven. I love that. Chuck Berry.
Yeah. I like ELO, but like you're right. I would even struggle to name other ELO songs. I've put on their albums on Spotify, or they've come up in mixes, and I've been happy to listen to pretty much anything they've done. But yeah, I'm not a big enough fan to be able to name a bunch of songs. I'm a little surprised that you went with Mr. Blue Sky because it's so famous. But at the same time, yeah, that trivia clearly indicates not as famous as they are in my head. Or
yeah, again, song. If it had been song first, I might have guessed ELO. But right. Naming a song of theirs, no idea.
Yeah. Cool. Anyway, moving on. Should we do the question?
Yeah, man.
So we have every week we get a question from one of our patrons. We might take a little break after this one because, and particularly actually, the way this one is phrased has a certain element of stop asking, which I think is now might be a time to take a small break from this. You can, of course, still leave questions, and we'll get to them in a future episode. But we might take a couple of weeks off doing questions, just sort of have to, keep putting out messages asking people, "You got any more questions?" We've got
that's your opportunity. If we're going to stop doing that for a few weeks, that's your opportunity to stop the random triv as well. If you want out,
yeah, there you go. That'll give us the out. Next week we won't be doing random non-Avatar triv, and we won't do a question. But we did get a question this week. 1 second. Yeah, so it's from Nicholas Pile? Pile? P-I-I-L. Nicholas Pile. Anyway, he says, I'm going to read his quote exactly here. You know what? Fine. What are your shoe sizes? Because you know what they can tell by the size of a man's shoes, right? The size of his foot.
I don't know. That feels almost very personal.
So I think it depends on what kind of shoe, because I've discovered if I'm getting shoes for work, like sort of I don't know, like sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like not dress shoes, but like like just plain black, like nice sort of businessy shoes.
Yeah, like smart shoes.
Smart shoes. That's for some reason I'm a 9 in those. But if I get anything that I actually want to put on my feet, Doc Martens, Converse, Vans, those are always like 10. Like at least.
Yeah,
sometimes 11, depending on the design of the shoe. And also, if they're imported from America, I don't know if their sizes are different. I think their sizes are different, but I seem to be a bigger size in American than in British. But in the UK version of it, when I get like a smart shoe for work, I'm a 9. And then if I'm getting anything I actually want to wear, it's usually a 10 or a 10.5.
Yeah, I sit around 11, 12, but tiny penis. Just really not impressive.
But yeah, because it's occurred to me, we don't have a huge number of patrons. We've got 33 of them, and they're lovely. And we we dearly hope you might want to join them, dear listener. If you for as little as $1 a month, you get episodes a week early of both this and Rewind reviews. Also, you get the opportunity to ask a question and get a little shout out on the podcast. But at a certain point, I mean, we did this for almost the whole season of Rewind reviews. And 14 episodes of this now? Most of those patrons have asked a question. So I think a break is a good idea. But if you want to join and ask a question, you're welcome to, and we'll do it on a future episode of this show. Keep in mind that, we record these sort of 8 to 10 weeks in advance of release. So when you ask the question, you won't necessarily hear the answer for a couple of weeks. But we will get to them all because we don't get that many of them. So you're almost guaranteed to get the shout out. So for as little as $1 a month, please head over. You can support our server costs as well as getting access to content a week early. And hopefully soon, I'm desperate to do it. We owe people the second episode of Nothing But Claps. We owe them it. It's coming. For those who don't remember and want to check it out, the first episode is on the Patreon. It is a podcast purely dedicated to where Chris interviews me, and it's all questions about clapping, related to clapping. When the last time I went to Clapham was, the loudest I ever clapped, the most recent time I clapped. It's ridiculous. It's so silly, but it's a lot of fun. It's a really good podcast. I was really proud and pleased with how that one turned out. We will be doing it again soon, where I ask those exact same questions of Chris.
Time.
So yeah. Good time. Although one of the questions I know the answer to.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I can't see that answer changing. So you definitely know that one.
Yeah. But anyway, we'll come to that. So yeah, if you want to get on the Patreon, it helps us out massively. It helps us cover like server costs and stuff because we're still having to pay for like the server for Fringe Observers to keep that back catalog up. And while it's not expensive when you're not adding new content to it, with that and all the other podcasts that we're sort of keeping the back catalogue alive for, it does start to add up. So yeah, feel free. I think we either are now breaking even or just under that. I think I've not done the math on that for a little while, so I feel like I've been saying we're just under breaking even for ages, but we've floated around the same amount on our Patreon for ages as well. So actually that probably tracks. But yeah, if you want to support, that's how you would do it. Otherwise, you can get us in all the usual places. YouTube.com/nothingbutstatic to watch YouTube stuff we put up. Haven't done as many videos recently because I've been super busy. As things have opened up in the UK, I've been working a lot more. So, but I will get back to our Ramblelogs shortly. Chris still owes us some Ramblelogs as well.
I do. I thought about it the other day.
But yeah, we need to get back on those and all the video versions of this content. Also, our other podcasts like Steven University, Nothing But Static, all available in all the usual places, including your Spotify's and your iTunes and on all those different podcast platforms. On those platforms, if you want to support us as well without actually donating money through the Patreon, you can also just go give them a like or a review or a heart or a poke or a subscribe or whatever format they do their review system in. If you go and support us by engaging with it on any of those platforms, that also helps us massively. Reviews are a big deal. In fact, at some point, maybe instead of Patreon questions, maybe I'll have a look and see if this podcast has had any reviews on iTunes, and I'll read out some nice reviews. So leave a nice review and you might get a shout out that way too. If you leave a nasty review, you probably get a shout out too.
Just
One
so
star
you know as well,
sucks.
Just so you know as well, very relevant to all of that. ELO are actually in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as well.
Oh, that's good. I'd say that was deserved.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd let you know.
I appreciate the information. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We're missing one key part of the episode, Chris. I haven't shouted out our pal Rapho yet. Raphodraws. Instagram.com/Raphodraws. Launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws. You can get all of Rapho's Tumblr, Twitter, YouTube. Has worked on a webcomic that you can download. I think there's physical copies as well that have been printed. I think. Don't quote me on that. But you can also get there's a Redbubble account with mugs and T-shirts with Rapho's art. Rapho does the key piece of art of Appa in front of the sun that we use for this podcast. So if you think that's a really cool piece of art, which you should, it's incorrect to think otherwise. You should go check out Rapho and hear all the other hear all the other great pictures. Listen to all the great art. Just bring it up, stick your ear to the to the computer. Just listen to the sound of silence.
Just close your eyes, really take it in. Just super quickly, Dan, because we're already over, but just a super quick game, because, you took us down this rabbit hole. Can you name, can you guess, say, 2 people that are multiple inductees in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? In other words, they've been inducted because they've been in multiple bands, or as a solo performer, and as part of a band, etc.
So Dave Grohl, almost certainly.
Dave Grohl is in there twice, in 2014 for Nirvana, 2021 for Foo Fighters.
Yeah. Who else has been in multiple big bands? Because the problem is a lot of those super bands are shit.
well, maybe go down the made an impact as a solo artist and in a band route, maybe.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right. That makes more sense. I guess like Paul McCartney.
Yep,
is
correct.
Probably in there.
So Paul McCartney, the Beatles in 1988 and solo career in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you could have said any member of the Beatles.
Are they all in there? Are they all in there twice?
Yeah, George Harrison, solo career 2004, John Lennon, solo career 1994, and then Ringo Starr. Oh, Ringo Starr, Award for Musical Excellence in solo career 2015.
Wow. So is that the full list? There can't be a lot of people that have gotten in there twice.
No, there's quite a few actually. So ones you'd know: Jeff Beck, Yardbirds and solo; Peter Gabriel, Genesis and solo; Michael Jackson, Jackson 5 and solo.
That I feel stupid for not getting. That one's really obvious.
Michael Jackson, Jackson 5 and solo. Names you'd know: Graham Nash, Crosby, Stills and Nash, The Hollies; Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac and solo.
Sure.
Jimmy Page, Yardbirds and solo. Lou Reed, Velvet Underground and solo. Rod Stewart, solo and Faces. Tina Turner, solo and Ike and Tina Turner. Ronnie Wood, Rolling Stones and Faces. Neil Young, solo and
there's
Buffalo
so many. Okay, I didn't think that would be a very long list, but evidently it is.
Yeah, there's some other people that I just haven't named because I don't know if you'd know them. But yeah, no, there's some other people. Oh, Eric Clapton, Yardbirds and Cream, but not solo. So he's been in there 3 times. The Yardbirds in 92, Cream in 93, and then his solo career in 2000.
Wow.
He seems to be the one who's in it the most. Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Well, there you go. There you go, indeed. Very good. And
my final Rock and Roll Hall of Fame fact, Dan. Chic, who I think did that famous, Chic, Nile Rodgers and Chic, everyone knows Chic. Chic have been nominated but not let in 2003, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2011, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016 and 2017. I'm sorry.
Just let them in.
If every member of the Beatles is in there twice, including for their solo careers, put Chic in there.
Yeah, just let him in at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, Nile Rodgers on his own might be in there, but
yeah.
Who knows?
My computer just decided to do a thing.
I will double check.
I'm so glad that all the weird tangenting has been at the back of the episode this week.
Yeah, it's been at the end. Yeah, I figure people could turn off if they want. I wouldn't have done it for this long if this was in the middle. Nile Rodgers is in there as a solo.
Tell that to Chris from last week when we talked for 10 minutes at the top about something random.
Oh, at the top as well, though. It's very rarely this long in the middle. Nile Rodgers as a solo artist was nominated in 2017, I believe.
There you go. There you go.
Oh no, he got the award for musical excellence. So not an inductee as such.
I don't know what to do because I've just looked and I have got pre-prepared one more bit of non-Avatar trivia because I found a few, just so I wouldn't have to keep looking once a week. But we've said we won't do it next week. Do you want to hear it now
I think
and get it out of the way?
Say it, but let's not make it a thing.
Okay.
We got lives to lead.
I don't know if
you're
going to be able to hear this and not want to talk about it. But get this right: Stilton cheese cannot be produced in Stilton, the town it is named after. It can only be produced in Derbyshire, Lancashire, and Nottinghamshire.
That's probably the best one.
Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting. That's probably the most interesting one. I'll ask why not. Why not?
Honestly, it's to do with EU law for some reason.
Yeah, fair play.
It's basically where the cheese actually originated from. It's called Stilton for a nearby village, but to maintain its status as Stilton, it has to be made in the place it's always been made, which wasn't Stilton. It just borrowed its name from there.
Fair
Bloody
play.
EU again. They sought to have the EU ruling amended to include the village of Stilton so that they could start actually producing it in the place it's named after, but they weren't allowed. Yeah, so now maybe we're out of the EU, that'll change, I don't know.
Oh, stepping on another political rant. I double-checked. No one with the name Stilton or Cheese in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The closest is obviously Crosby, Stills and Nash. And Stephen Stills, who is an American singer-songwriter known for Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Jesus Christ. Right, we have to end this, because this is just... When was this not an Avatar podcast anymore? But thanks everyone for listening. Obviously, come back next week, I guess. Maybe if you want to. I don't know if you would after this, but I'll remain hopeful that we won't see a drop off in listeners after this whole shit. But yeah, come back next week when we won't have non-Avatar trivia and we won't have a listener question. We'll just talk about the show. That thing that you came here for.
Yeah, and it will be around the 45 to an hour mark. It usually is, not an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. So yeah, thanks very much for listening, everyone. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll come back next week to have a chat about the Tales of Ba Sing Se.